So the saying goes, art, freedom, and creativity will change society faster than politics. Those words were most famously spoken by the Ukrainian businessman and oligarch Viktor Punik. However, not all art is made to change society. Often, it may. Regardless, many people make art for different reasons. Some make it as a statement on society. Others make it for religious reasons. And some do it for money. I was once told a book is considered to be classic only if it still has something to say. Well, today we are asking the question, why do we create art? I'm joined by a special guest, Luke Merwin from Merwin Music.
Hello.
Why don't you tell us a little about yourself and your channel?
Well, my name is Luke Merwin, and I guess I run, you could call it, the Merwin Music YouTube channel. Interestingly, I guess I started that channel a long time ago. It says I joined YouTube in like 2012, but I probably just started maybe a year and a half ago, taking it seriously and adding videos regularly. And it's been an interesting thing. I feel like I kind of viewed it as I'm doing these things, so I might as well just make a video of it. And it's kind of started to take off from there. So it's exciting. It's kind of reached that level. It's certainly still not worth it as far as money and my time goes, but I enjoy doing it. So it's kind of a fun hobby, and not many people's hobbies make them any money. They are just kind of fun. So it'd be nice if my hobby makes some money. And that's kind of how I got into that. A little bit more background of me. I graduated in 2011 with a degree in jazz guitar and have always loved music. And kind of my main gig, so to speak, is I'm the worship director at a church. So I do that, do the music for that and the planning every week. And then I teach guitar lessons, piano lessons, saxophone lessons, a whole bunch of stuff like that. So keep busy with music. It's kind of interesting. I think people would figure you have to be like a rock star to be a full-time musician, but music is my job in one way or another, whether it's lessons or playing or doing YouTube and things like that. So I would say I am a full-time musician, and it's great, and I love it.
Awesome. Check out the YouTube channel. It will be linked down below. And I am also currently studying jazz on piano at my...
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Nice.
And I also serve on a worship team where I'm actually have become the worship director is the title I get.
There you go.
Got more in common than you think.
Yep.
So why do we create art? Or at least why do you think we create art?
Why do we? Well, I feel like it's a funny thing. I don't think I can speak on behalf of anyone else but myself. I think, why do we create art? I know why I create art, and I think why a lot of people create art. Ultimately, it's just because we have something to say, and we want to say it. I think the different mediums of art, I think whether it's painting or music or even movies, for example, all are a different way to express either some emotion or some feeling you have. And I think good art ultimately is when we tap into what that does the best.
Yeah, I think it, like you said, it boils down to what people having something to say. And it also boils down to having a need to be listened to rather than just heard. I feel like a lot, and this doesn't go for just music, but also goes for theater and other things. It's like you said, you have something to say, but not just to say it, but to have people hear it or listen to it.
Yeah, well, I think it's that, probably what we're getting at is that to be understood in a way. It's one thing for you to hear something or someone to hear something. It's another thing for them to really know, like, oh, I get where that guy's coming from, or that empathy really at its truest form, where you can relate to someone through the way they've said something artistically.
So I think we need to define what art is, at least in the context we're going to be talking about it. So what do you think art is?
I think art is really anything that creatively expresses anything. That's kind of the broadest you could possibly get with it. I boil down to art probably to the main, like, either language, so either it's books or poems or things like that, or I would say it could be either visual art, which would be like paintings or sculptures or things like that, or I would kind of boil it down into maybe like auditory art, which would fall into that music and sound and things like that.
I feel like it boils down to two different levels. Either there's what is, and there's obviously most of it crosses over and is part two, but there's the commercial side of it, and then there's the anything that has meaning behind it, or if you get meaning from it, it's art. But also there is the commercial side stuff like graphic arts for logos and such like that. But the main thing is that anything where people have purposely done something and people find meaning in it somehow, even if it isn't the meaning of, say, the creator or themselves. If they look at Vincent van Gogh's painting The Starry Night and they think it's a commentary on society, then that's what that gives it meaning, even if Vincent van Gogh didn't make it for those reasons.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because that touches on, is that, I think Dave Grohl, don't quote me on this, but I think there's a Dave Grohl quote where he said, like, it's a powerful thing in, like, music where you can sing a song to, like, 40,000 people, and the 40,000 people can sing it back to you for all of their own different reasons. I think that's kind of he's trying to say one thing with the music, and everyone can almost interpret it their own way and sing it back because it touches them in its own unique way. So
yeah, I think I have actually seen it's like an interview, with him talking with a writer. I think I've seen that interview, but it is a philosophy that has existed when coming to art for a very long time. Even Plato suggested that art is not something that has a definite answer.
Sounds good. There's no answer. What is your favorite medium of art? So whether it be music or painting or anything like that.
I primarily fall into music because I'm a musician. We briefly mentioned earlier, I'm studying jazz at a local college here.
Yeah.
Jazz theory to be exact, with a minor in philosophy, if that matters. That's where when I go to find whatever kind of, I don't really know how to put it simply, but for whatever thing I need to go to, I usually will go to music first. But another one I really, really invested in a lot is film. I haven't done too much, ironically, because our YouTube channel doesn't have very many actual videos. But I've also been very involved in various film classes. I've made lots of short films, and we're planning to, on my YouTube channel, we're working on one right now, actually, that we hope will be pretty good. So it's usually one of those two. I either go for movies or music. Usually music first because they tend to be shorter and do a better job at emotions rather than just story.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, though, because I think, like, me too, I don't know, similarly, I come at it from, music has been so much a part of my life, and I love it the most, but I almost feel like film can capture, you can add music to a story and to a drama and to all these other things, and it's like the complete package, so to speak, where I almost probably would just focus on the music because that's what I'm like good at, but I feel like it almost all can culminate together in really powerful movies. So ironically, from a musician, I might say that films are my favorite, but the music world is the one I'm a part of, and it's the one I have any experience in. So here we are.
Yeah, one thing I found with actually everyone I've had on the show so far, everyone has said that they were involved, ironically, very much in music, even if their channel was not about music.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we had a guest on last week, and we were talking about their gaming channel. We talked about video games. They were talking about how they were both guitarists, not at the professional level or even the amateur level, but still very much into music, and how the music and games could affect a lot of that and how you perceive everything. And that's true in film too. In the film classes I've taken or whatever, there's a big portion of it's on what song you put where, because depending on what the song is, even if it doesn't have words, what one you pick makes way more difference than what shot you use.
Yeah.
So what makes art good, powerful, or even stand the test of time?
Well, I think what makes it perhaps powerful is the effectiveness with which it communicates ultimately what is trying to be said. So I think if maybe the emotion or the whatever the artist was trying to convey with that, if it really comes across strongly, I think that's what makes it powerful. When you almost take in art and you're like, wow, I know what that guy was thinking or feeling, and you kind of can see it. I think what makes it stand the test of time is maybe perhaps how many people it does that for. So I think if it's powerful for a vast amount of people, that's what kind of makes it stand the test of time. And I think ultimately both of those things are kind of a sliding scale of what makes it good or not. I think also standing the test of time with art, I think it's, if we're trying to say something, I think there's a difference between what's necessarily true and what's just like what someone was feeling in the moment. And I think art that is really universal almost stands outside of time. And it's like could be made yesterday or could be made 200 years ago and it's the same. I think it's when it says something that's true. It speaks a truth into either the way humans are, or the way the world is, that is just never going to change. And ultimately then it rings true, whether it's new or old or anything in between.
Well, how do you feel about art and politics and how will they entwine?
How do I feel about them?
Yeah.
I feel...
do you think that's something people should do or shouldn't do? Do you feel like that is not the best use of it? Do you think it is?
I think it is. And I mean, ultimately the question is like, do you think political cartoons are art in a way? And I think they kind of are in a very vague sense. So I think there's an added benefit of expressing political views through art or through mediums like the cartoon and whatnot that conveys a different way of looking at it. But I think really I think artists shouldn't get involved in politics just to do it. I think if you really have a thought behind it or something to say, then so be it. But I think there's kind of a lot of people that perhaps have a stage or have a platform. Either they're an actor or an actress or they're a comedian or something, but they really don't know anything about politics. But that stage allows them where they feel like, oh, I should speak into this or I should say something. And it's like, yeah, but you don't really know. It's not your area of expertise. So I think if you're in it and you have something to say, you should say it, but I don't think you should just say it just for the sake of feeling like you have to or you need to or something like that.
So, especially I feel nowadays, although it has been a problem that exists throughout all time, what about art that is made simply for the monetary sense, such as movies that are shoveled out just to make money, or pop songs that are made not for their view, but for the fact that they can make a buck off of it? Do you think that invalidates the art?
I think yes and no. I think the most interesting thing is that, you know, whenever people talk about that, I always think of how it's called the music business. And ultimately, businesses do well when they make money. So the music business is in the business of making money selling music. So I don't hold it against them for making music that they just churn out. And it's like, we know this has mass appeal, this will sell the most, and then they churn it out just to turn over and make money. I don't fault them for that necessarily. I almost put a bigger emphasis on the consumer side of it, where I feel like there are people that I've talked to where they're like, oh, music used to be so much better, or, you know, classic rock is such great music, or pop songs today are horrible. And then usually my follow-up question to that is like, when's the last time you've spent any money on music? And it's like, oh, I don't. I just listen to Spotify for free, or I don't buy anything. I just download it. And it's like, okay, well, you're not paying any money into the music business, but you still want something out of it. And I think that's kind of the problem, is it's like, if you don't like that music, then just don't support it. And if you support the music you like, ultimately, I think that music keeps getting made. So I don't fault people for making money necessarily. I almost fault it more from the other way of, if you like something, you should be willing to put some money into it in order to get more of it. You shouldn't expect to get anything for free.
Yeah, the music industry has changed a lot in history. It used to be the only way you made money was through Patreons in, say, Beethoven's time. And then after that, we soon got into some other areas that were less defined, and then a big part of the more modern was they sold sheet music. And then that kind of died out, and it was records. And then after the whole Napster and the pirating and YouTube and other things like that, you can access music and most forms of art, period, at any time, anywhere, because we all have supercomputers in our pockets. So with that, how do you think art nowadays has changed, at least more geared towards a philosophical sense? Do you think that it has made art more impactful, that it can be accessed anywhere and really anyone can make it? Like when it comes to music, anyone can buy a $30 interface and record their guitar and some vocals. Back then you couldn't do that.
I think it's interesting because I think it's so great. I mean, from my side of things, it's amazing to me just the technology difference from when I was in high school trying to make music and now. And I wasn't even ever a part of the analog recording days. Like, my trying to make music was like my horrible, I don't even remember what it was. It had like 8 megabytes of RAM computer trying to pump like one channel of audio into it, and it wasn't happy about it. And like kind of that I think I went over to my friend's house and we recorded on like a 2-track CD. It went straight to CDs, like digital recorder and whatnot. So from my side of it, I love that things are cheaper and that anyone can get into it and whatnot. But I think the problem I've had is almost a disconnect where it's impossible to find what you want. There's so much out there, and the noise floor is so high for everyone making things and so much stuff that I feel like it's so hard to connect with the people that would like what's happening, or from my perspective of it, trying to find either music that I would like, but I'm like, I don't have the time to sift through all this other stuff because there's so much bad stuff, regrettably, that it's like, how do I find, the stuff that I do like? And I think it's great that it can be out there and people can do it for cheap, but it's hard to get connected with those people.
Yeah. I think I might have a recorder like the one you're mentioning over there. I've never used it. I actually was just given it, and I actually never even plugged it in. It's a 2-track recorder. It's all blue and goes straight to CDs.
Yeah, so funny.
I was just given that a little bit ago, and someone gave it to me, like, I found this in my garage or something. And I'm like, cool. I'll use it as a prop. But, yeah, so, like you were mentioning how that everyone can do it, it's kind of flooded the market almost.
Yeah.
When it comes to, say, an economics, from an economic standpoint, the more of something there is, the less and less it's valued. That's just scarcity in the market. So when it's so filled, it kind of hurts the industry side because there's so many options and there's so much you can get it, and you can get it for free. But I think at the same time, I think it has given voices to people. If they deserve this chance or not is completely subjective. But it's given people voices, especially stuff like YouTube, to anyone, regardless of age, sex, race, or where you were born. If you don't have to be born in, California to become a movie star, like that you had to be back then. You had to be in that system. You had to be there. You don't have to be living in, say, New York to be a jazz musician, where those were very age and sex and time and location based to become that type of an artist. Nowadays, anyone can do whatever they want, regardless of anything, and a lot of them have found ways to monetize it. That's a little bit harder to do than it might have been back then, but it's at the same time it did make the barrier for entry much easier.
Yeah, I think it's interesting though, because I feel like almost the downside of it is I feel like in this day and age, in order to make it as an artist, you have to have a lot of other skills, where I feel like, not to downplay a generation ago of musicians, they were all very talented, but I feel like you could get away with just being a really good musician, and they would give you a record deal and someone else would worry about your schedule and would worry about your image and would worry about even recording you and all these other things, and it was like you just had to worry about the one thing. And I feel like that's almost a lot of why I feel like people think music back then was so good, because it's like, yeah, because you had the best guitar player playing for the best recording engineer, where nowadays it's like I have to be the best musician and the best, recording engineer, and I have to be the best marketer and business person, and I have to hand on all these hats in order to be super well-rounded in order to have any impact, because it doesn't do me any good to be a really good guitarist anymore, because that's not enough.
Yeah, I feel that very much. Personally, I've learned several instruments just so I could get gigs. I couldn't just be a piano player. I also had to be a guitar player. I also had to be a vocalist. I also, and that's just in a very small sphere of things. And not trying to be a full-time musician, just trying to be able to play. You had to be and with trying to make it monetizable. I don't know if that's a word.
Yeah.
You have to you not only have to be able to be really good at those type of things, you also have to be good at things that aren't even would normally be in your industry, like graphic design. And I think that it's both a can be both a good thing and a bad thing because it does separate. It is a little bit of that separation from people that are as skilled. So someone that's has virtually no skill isn't going to really become a superstar in most cases. So it's a little bit lower of a barrier. I think it helps give another level of you can't just do this and become famous, but it's that line is kind of tough and where it all fits because it's so much different. And even
well, I always think it's funny. Like I was telling my wife at one point, and I was saying it's funny where I feel like all like YouTube videos fit into like, what is it, like 4 categories, where I feel like you could either say there's good content, like the person knows what they're doing, and the video's good, and those are the ones that are really popular that you really like. Or it's like good content, the person knows what they're doing, but the video is just like horrible. Like let's say it's like not edited at all, or it's like on a phone, and it's like I'm really interested in what this person is saying or doing because they know what they're doing, but then the video gets in the way of it. And then I was like, or there are people that are really good at editing and slick video, but then you watch it and you're like, it's like they don't know what they're doing, or they, it's like it's not enjoyable to watch them build this or that or do this because it's just all like flash and video editing and there's no substance.
Yeah.
And then, or there's like the videos where it's like they don't know any, and you just skip it and you're like, oh, thumbs down. It's like a bad video. They don't know what they're talking about. You can't hear anything. Like, and I think it's funny, like all the videos fit in like those 4 categories.
Oh yeah, because we've been working with a lot of, and I've gone through several smaller channels trying to get guests. You're actually our largest subscribed guest to date by quite a bit. And you can definitely tell that there are some people that are really, really good at editing video, and there's people that are have really good substance. Their content is very substantive. There's a lot there. It's very depending on what they're doing. It's like say they're a skateboarder. They're really, really good at skateboarding, but at the same time it falls flat because they don't have very good production value.
Yeah. Well, and I always think it's interesting too because I feel like with video it's like you don't even know who your audience is almost, so you can't tailor it. It's like it needs to be generic almost and appeal to just whoever, and you don't know who your target audience is, so to speak. So I feel like for me, like when I watch videos, I really don't like when people cut in like all the jokes and all the commentaries, and you're like, I just want to learn this little 5-minute thing, but then the video's like twice as long because they're trying to make it like funny and whatever and stuff.
Get that watch time up.
Yeah, so then it's like my conviction is like I don't really like that when I watch a video, so I don't really want to add that into my videos. But then I feel like admittingly I'm like some of my videos are really dry because I'm just like, here's what it is. Like it's almost like a teacher lecture, like here's what you need to know, here's the information. There's no like anecdotes or funny jokes or things. So it's like, how do you balance that? Because I don't know whether people are like me where they don't want that extra stuff, or people are like, this is boring, I want to be entertained, not just kind of learn something.
Yeah, that's a thing just in music nowadays too. I don't know if you ever did this, but I don't know if you've ever heard of drumline, indoor drumline.
I never did it. I've heard of it.
I did indoor drumline, and we had a show, and it was actually a bunch of 80s songs, and it wasn't just that we played them really well, because we would play them very, very well, execute that part perfectly fine, but we get a score. We would get a very low score because we weren't entertaining. We looked like one of the judges said on the tape, we looked like we all had a gun up against our head, like we were being forced to do it. And it's this idea that you have to be entertaining. So we had to like basically not only play the song really well, but kind of dance almost in whatever style it was. Like I don't know if you ever even did like marching band and drill. That's highly involved in this.
Yeah.
In the drill, they rewrote the drill. So one of the songs it was like a medley of like 20 or 30 songs, but there was a section that was "Don't Touch This" by MC Hammer, and we had all of the people marching had to do the little hammer like pants dance or whatever. And like we had to make it to where it was just fun to watch, because just playing it executing it perfectly wasn't enough. And this was people with DMAs in music saying that you guys are just boring to watch.
Yeah.
And that just in art is just a thing. But there are people that like the more their style is just here's the information point blankly. And it's in finding your audience is always a difficult thing because if it's too specific, then it's hard to find, especially on YouTube. It's hard to find that growth. If you're catering to a very, very small niche only people that want that kind of content are probably going to find it and follow it. And if you're very small, no one's going to find it and follow it. But if the broader you are, the more likely people will see it. And it's kind of that conflict and resolution there of balancing that. And that's been maintained all throughout history and art. I mean, in Picasso's lifetime, no one liked his art.
Yeah, that happens way too often.
People they thought it was weird and no one liked it. But after he died, everyone flocked to it and absolutely loved it. And part of it was just the fact that he was not there at the right time, or maybe he was. That's arguable, but the audience to art is a big thing, because if you have no audience for your art, no one's listening to it per se. Does it really say something then?
Yeah, if a tree falls in the woods and no one's there to hear it.
How central is emotional communication in the nature of art?
How central? I would say it's pretty central. I feel like sitting here, my thought is there art that is communication without it being emotional at all? I feel like we would probably tend to say that isn't art. So I feel like the emotional aspect of it is pretty central.
Well, I think the best example is this, and this is arguable if this is art, but some people consider teaching, like you mentioned earlier, an art form, but it's not exactly exciting to watch sometimes. And there's not a whole lot of emotion in, here's how you do something. But there is a lot of talent and skill involved, and many consider an art form, but there's not a lot of... No one cries usually in being taught something unless they just have given up.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting because I think the art form of teaching is really... I mean, I feel like good teachers are ones that hold your attention without the need for just filler. A joke here or there that almost supplicates what they're saying, but, they don't need that because they're engaging enough with just what they know. But I feel like the emotional piece of communication and art is probably maybe the most prevalent in music. I feel like music is all about emotion in a way, and I ultimately feel like music is poetry with more emphasis. You can add a whole bunch of musical emphasis on some line of poetry, kind of.
Yeah, I think if I can remember correctly, it was Victor... Oh, I can't think of his last name. It was Victor something. I'll leave a link down below if you're really interested in who it was. But he said, music expresses which cannot be spoken. I might be messing it up just a little bit, but that was the idea behind it, was that music is able to communicate things that words can't.
Yeah, and I mean, ultimately, I think music is like they say like math is the universal language. I think music is kind of the other side of that coin. I think music almost expresses emotion and things that we feel beyond what you can with words, and it reaches across language barriers to where people can relate through music regardless of language.
Yeah, it's interesting because people have done stuff where they've taken because some people believe that the music that we hear is, because in most cases, although there are people that do like to do microtonal music, and India is really big on microtonal music, but they suggest that we find these emotions in the music based on nurture rather than nature. But an interesting study I was reading the other day had taken some music out to a native tribe that's never heard music of any kind of Western or really anywhere else. They were very isolated, and they played the music, and they found that they had the same type of emotional responses that someone who had grown up around it would have, which someone you went there and tried to show them math, they're not smart or intelligent. It's not something that would break that barrier. They're the barrier of entry to understand math. There really isn't for music.
Yeah.
Noting that, how closely is artistic expression and meaning tied to the culture we live in, at least in your opinion?
I mean, I think it's hand in hand. I think the simplest form of that is like you were saying with art and politics kind of tied into each other. But I think ultimately, at least with music, that's my specialty perhaps, but I think music is always kind of really tied close to what's happening at that period in time. And you could trace, I feel like the best example of that is all the Vietnam protest songs and whatnot and things. And it's kind of the art culture of that time is very reflected in what was happening. So I think no one creates art in a vacuum. You're always creating art through your lens of experience. and through your take on the world and through where you live and when. So I think whether you mean it to or not, I think the artist always is kind of tying that into the culture they're living in.
Yeah, I think that's really important to note that. But with that question, though, is like, for example, the song Don't Stop Believing is very prevalent in our culture. Everyone either knows or at least thinks they know the words to Don't Stop Believing. And it has that culture tied to it it gives it new meaning. It gives it a new perspective.
Yeah, I always think it's interesting because they're so intertwined. There's a John Cusack movie, High Fidelity. Have you ever heard of that?
I think I've heard references to it, but I don't think I know I haven't seen it.
You should watch it. It's decent. It's got Jack Black in it too.
But
he makes a comment in there where he's like, "Am I sad because I listen to pop music, or do I listen to pop music because I'm sad?" And it was like basically where the music he's listening to, does it fuel into how he's feeling, or does he, like, which of those chicken and the egg came first kind of a thing?
Yeah,
where
it's the classic.
The music
I think Plato said it first. Does art reflect life, or does life reflect art?
Yeah. Sorry, I had a less cultural, a less highbrow example of that with my John Cusack movie.
It might not have been Plato. I'm trying to think of this off the top of my head. It might have been Aristotle. I'm thinking it's Aristotle that said that.
Yeah. I have no idea.
I try to be a little bit more informed and stuff. Trust me, I've done plenty of stuff on here, and I've done tons and tons of research. I'm not super cultured, but I try to make it that way. And on the flip side, my co-host, who isn't here today, like we mentioned earlier, how we always have that jokester. He is very thoughtful at times, but he primarily just makes jokes. And people seem to respond to that because they like the fact that I'm very straightforward and I speak a lot of philosophy and mind and stuff, but he, on the flip side, makes jokes about male anatomy. And it seems to work pretty well. How do you think the arts relate to your class? So, do you think, because this was more prevalent in the days of Chopin, I don't know if you're familiar with who that is.
Yeah.
He's a classical pianist that came a little bit after Beethoven and Mozart. And the art he made was for his patrons, which were the upperclassmen. So many of the people that were lower in class didn't really hear it or really even enjoy it that much. The music they liked more was hymnals they heard in church.
Yeah, or their bar songs.
Or their bar song. Yeah, that's another great one.
Or their bar songs that Martin Luther turned into hymns.
That's true too. So how do you think that affects us nowadays? Do you think that this class is divided, or do you think that our ability to access it all has kind of made it to where everything is broad and for everyone? Or where's that line, if there is one at all? Is there a class division on what type of art you like?
Yeah, I would say certainly since that time period, art is way more accessible. And I think way more, certainly at least in the USA where I am here, most people can afford to have some form of art. But I think that's kind of the difference is if you can't afford food to eat and things, then obviously you can't afford art. So I think the art kind of takes on a different role, so to speak. But I think, ultimately, I think, it's way more broad spread. I think with the advent of recording, I think it is an interesting shift from kind of classical music and that elite and going to listen to an orchestra to let's just record this popular song, more or less. And then that's more what pop music is today, is the bar song and the hymns and whatnot that have been recorded, and you can distribute it to people and hear it on the radio and whatnot. So I think it's kind of that flip. And, interestingly, there is still classical music, even though it's, I don't know, maybe orchestral music and thing is a better term for it because it's new.
It's still considered classical.
But yeah, it's still classical. But it's just interesting. Like, I think of like when I was in college and we had, what was it, music history, like 1, 2, 3. And 1 was like the beginning of music, Gregorian chant, and it was horrible. And then 2 was like, yeah, Tchaikovsky, Beethoven, Mozart, all these things. And everyone's like, we actually like this music. And then 3 was like the atonal, contemporary, all this stuff. And my thought of it was like, it was interesting timing where when those elite classes were like, we need something new and more complicated and all this, they made it almost so unapproachable at the same time that recording music snuck in. And I feel like it was a big switch in, well, I don't want to listen to that. I want to listen to this popular music that's way more approachable And I feel like most people can wrap their heads around and understand and tap their foot with. And there you go.
Yeah, that's John Cage is, I think, the primary example most people go to when talking about the modern classical. It's not, at least from what I've learned, it's not referred to as classical because it's old. It's referred to classical because of the way it is. It's the way it's approached. It's approached differently than pop music is. Pop music is approached for the audience. Classical music is approach to the form. So either they embrace the form, they really like the 12-tone series, or they go off the wall and they write songs where 3 people eat cereal, mic'd up. I have actually seen a live performance of that.
Yeah.
I actually am a big fan of John Cage, personally. I think, but not for the same reasons I would be for, say, insert rock band here.
Yeah. Is he the one that has all the prepared piano or whatever? Who is that? That's the where you like put stuff in a piano and it's like weird noises mixed with music and like a bunch of people play one piano. Is that him or is that someone else?
It might be him. He's done some off the wall stuff. I don't think so. I think it's an even more modern person that I don't think I've heard of. John Cage was most famously known for his song 433, which is a song that's just the page of music is just rest.
Yeah. Well, if you type prepared piano in Google, the first thing that comes up is John Cage.
Oh, it might be.
Definition techniques VST. There you go. Maybe I was right.
It might be right. Yeah, so like I said, he does some off the wall stuff. Like,
yeah.
I believe there's a piece, if I remember correctly, there's a piece of music that he wrote called As Slow as Possible, and it's been performed. I think they started performing it back in the 90s, I think, if I remember correctly, and it's still continuously being performed. It's being performed at like 1 BPM, like a month or something. Or so I think it's even slower than that. And it's set to, the piece of music will be continuously played for like the next 600 years. So this song is both older than me and will live beyond me. Although it never was performed in his lifetime that long. I think in his lifetime, it was only performed for a total of like 2 or 3 hours. I think he died, I want to say in like the early 80s, but I could be mistaken there. There's a great video actually, and I'll leave a link down below where they explain, I believe it's Adam Neely explains the As Slow as Possible song. He has the actual facts, so go there for that. I'm just trying to remember, because I watched this video like 6 months ago, if not more. I don't know if you're familiar with Adam Neely. Have you ever heard of that? He's a jazz bassist on YouTube.
No.
And he does a lot of theory. It's mostly very dense theory and reharmonization, and where I was really first shown music that wasn't written for, just A through G. And when I learned music, I learned it. I actually started out on trombone in a very classical setting. It wasn't until when I got into high school when I signed up for a jazz class to play the trombone. But my teacher said, no, you're going to play piano. And I didn't play the piano. The only thing I really played was trombone, some trumpet. And I got into jazz and more into that. And I've learned off of YouTube and stuff and found some other that it's just not just, like in India they have, I don't know the term they use, but they use increments far smaller than us per octave. I think it's like 32 or something. And they also have stuff like they have rhythmic solfege. We have regular standard do solfege where do re mi fa sol la ti do, which is 12. They also have rhythmic solfege. So similar to where we have like 1-ianda, 2-ianda, they have, I think it goes something like taka timi taka. It's like really weird. It's these, and the way they divide it is really cool. I'll leave a link down to that where I think it's Ben Levin. I think he's also a YouTube guitarist, and he talks about how to use that and how to take that and interpret it into art. With leading into that, how do you think taking these other concepts that are foreign, even if not necessarily foreign from another country, but foreign from what's the norm, and integrating it into art, does it make it better because it's more original? Does originality make art better? It is very subjective, but how does that make more of them? You get the idea.
Yeah, I think it's funny because I don't know, I feel like part of me would be like, oh, it'd be cool to study not just Western music. But then the other part of me is like, but I'm not even that good at just Western music, so I should just focus on that and not just spread myself too thin. I don't need to worry about other things. But I forgot your question. I forgot my segue here.
It does bringing in foreign elements, even if they're not.
Oh, originality! I got it. Does originality matter, right?
Yes, that's a better way to say it.
I feel like if you chase originality, then it's dangerous, because I think if you're if you're trying to just be different or be creative or be original, then I feel like you don't create good art necessarily. You just create something that's weird, because ultimately anything that isn't weird has kind of already been done before. But I think if you're just trying, if you know what you want to say and you're trying to say it in your own way, so just the way I want it to, then I think you have the potential for real originality. You're not trying to copy anyone else, but I think to just try and say, I want to be different, I want to be original, and chase that, you almost lose sight of kind of, I think, the content and the focus of why you're making art. And then you get lost, and then it becomes the empty shell, so to speak. And I think it's easy to sniff that out, kind of, okay, yeah, that's weird and different and it's original, but maybe it's not necessarily good.
Yeah, I think it's important to try to be original, at least to some extent, because if you're not, you get generic pop songs, which to an extent is fine, but if you're, it's nice to innovate with, say, the new technologies that come out. A lot of people look at, like, say, keyboards, because I play piano, and a lot of people, especially piano players that are even better than me, not surprisingly better than me, but surprisingly they say that they don't like to play on keyboards because it's limiting, it's different, it doesn't feel the same, it doesn't have the same kind of emotion. But to me, I look at it and you can just, even me just improvising some stuff here and there, using the different tones it makes has so much of an impact. And there's a very famous study, but not necessarily study, but paper, I think it's a paper, it might be a video, like a documentary, where it talked about how timbral variety, like the way certain sounds, like the difference between a guitar and like a voice, and the different things sound differently. Like with the music of the Beatles as a big heavy one, they made pop music, but they had so much timbral variety. There was a lot of different sounds, and how that impacted things, and how even playing the same exact thing on, say, guitar and piano has a much different feel, because, well, one of the primary things to get scientific is that the overtone series, different instruments play different overtones, and how that can affect the way you interpret music. And like using a piano with a different tone, it creates a different type of atmosphere. Almost, it might be a little bit of a, if you use like a funky sound and keyboard sound, it might be a little to do with that you're just used to hearing that in that context. But it's able to make new and different thing while still being able to make your statement, because you may not be able to say the things you can with limited, but if you can say it with limited, I think that is very impactful and can make some great art. Quality is really, I think, key over originality.
Yeah, well, and I think too, it's not getting distracted by technology. I think it's really easy to get distracted with the new fancy keyboard or the new fancy plugin or this or that, and it becomes more important than why you were making art in the first place, so to speak. Whereas if you just really focus on using it as a tool to make your end goal instead of getting distracted by it, then I think you come out a lot better.
Well, I agree with you somewhat on that, but I do think to an extent you can use that new sound as an inspiration to make a song. I think that is a place where many people can find that. I think a great example of this is Andrew Wong. I don't know if you ever heard of that. Another YouTuber, which I'll link down below, a lot of them down there, where he finds inspiration in these different sounds. Like he took the same thing they used to make like the space sounds you can find in like records and stuff, and he used that to make these tones, and hearing those sounds led him and inspired him to make a very spacey sounding album.
Yeah, which I think proves my point of you're using the technology to make music and make art, not getting distracted by the technology of this and that new thing, or the way this keyboard feels. I always think it's interesting because I feel like I don't know, I feel like it's funny. I've been kind of reading up on like guitar setups and setting up guitars, and I feel like people reach a point where they're like famous musicians, and it's like, my guitar setup has to be, it's like they want it to be exact. They're like, you better set this up to like the 0.00 whatever millimeter, all the height and action and all these things. And I'm thinking, like, I like how all my guitars play differently, where it makes me
all mine are the same way. All mine are the same way. I haven't really changed really hardly any of them since I got them. In fact, one of them I literally can't change. So they're all
and I feel like it's almost like there's a song in there. It's not like we like create music. We're just like music archaeologists, and you like dig it out from where it is, and it's like different songs live in different instruments, and I like that they're different and weird and not all the same. We don't need to hunt down that like, no, this has to be this way for me to make music. Like, no, it is whatever it is.
So final thoughts why do you create art, and why do you think other people make art, and has this conversation changed your mind at all or given you a new perspective on things, or what are your final thoughts? Why do we create art?
I don't think so. I think we create art to be heard and to hear and to feel and connect with one another. I think that's true for me. I think that's why I make art. I think a big piece of it for me is just that I think everyone has been made with a spark of creativity in them. My personal belief is that we're all created by a God, and that God had infinite creativity, and he poured it out in this world, and you can see it in sunsets and in all kinds of things in nature. And I think we're made the same way, where we have that creative drive, whether we fulfill it with music, or whether we fulfill it with painting, or whether we fulfill it with the amazing amount of organization that goes into spreadsheets. There are a lot of different ways that people can be creative, but I think that's just ingrained inside of us. And I think ultimately it all just plays into that way we were made to be, to just express that creativity.
Yeah, I think that this has opened my mind up a little bit to other things, such as the fact that monetizing art is pretty important. I've always thought it was really important, especially trying to do stuff that I have done. But it's so crucial to not get stuck up on the reason behind it, because some people make it for different reasons, and they should make it for whatever reason they want, even if it is for money. Personally, I tend to gravitate towards the art that's made more for other reasons, such as religious purposes. Like I said, I too am on a worship team, or songs that are just to play in the car, or songs that are a statement on music itself, like John Cage. So
I think it's a catch-22, right? I mean, I feel like you want to create art with the purest of motives, but at the end of the day, I need to eat and I need a place to sleep. Like, can't do it for free. So
yeah, I
think we've seen different things work throughout different times, and I think what will work now will always be changing. I think it's interesting that we've kind of gone back to that patron system in some respects, at least certainly in the YouTube community.
That's for sure.
We'll see if that sticks, or if it changes to something else.
So we want to know what your thoughts are on the subject. Please tell us in the comments down below, and please check out Merwin music. He's got a great channel that's very, very interesting and can learn a lot. I personally have learned a ton. Heck, it's just fun to watch him build the stuff he builds. It's very entertaining, high production value, I think. And hopefully we can get him a few more subscribers. But as always, thank you for listening.